Okay, so the last thing in your notes is basically asking you to take a linear inequality or an absolute value inequality that's already been graphed and write its equation. Now, I made this and there was no way for me to shade, so I'm going to go ahead and tell you up front the portion that I want you to shade. And you can use a highlighter or you can use a colored pencil, anything you want to. But I want you at home on this page to go ahead and shade above this line that is drawn in. And then for this one, I want you to shade below the line that was drawn in. So we're going to begin with this, and we're going to determine from the graph what the equations should look like, okay? Okay, so for the first one, okay, this is a linear equation. You can see the line. It's a solid line, so that automatically tells you that it's either going to be this, or this, right? Because it includes the solutions on the line. Okay, so let's write in this symbol last. Let's just get the sides worked out, okay? Y equals, let's look at this linear equation. So if I look at where it touches the y-axis, it crosses right there at 5. So I know that plus 5 is my y-intercept. Now I just have to figure out what the slope is, okay? So I'm going to scan, and I can see that if I plot some of the points that are right in the grid marks, it looks like they all have a slope. First of all, it's a positive slope because the line is rising, but the line goes up 2 and to the right 1. So if the slope is 2 over 1, that's the same thing as just 2x. So 2x plus 5 is this equation. Now I got to look at this shading to determine which of these it is. I know it's a solid line, so I know it's one of these and not this or this, okay? So let's look at the shading. Is the shading above the line or below the line? Now it's kind of hard to judge below and above when the line's pretty steep, but you can probably tell that if I were to straighten this out and maybe curve it down a little bit, above would be over here, okay? So that's where the shading is. So since the shading is above the line, I'm going to put in a greater than or equal to symbol, okay? So this is the equation that matches that graph. So that should help you as you're trying to look at a graph and judge what the equation or the inequality should be. Okay, now let's do one with absolute value. So again, what we're going to do first is we are going to treat this as an absolute value. So I'm going to put some absolute value. I'll put in the sign last, but you should be able to see that this absolute value is a dotted line. So the only option for a dotted line is either going to be the greater than or less than symbol, and that depends on where the shading is. So let's go ahead and put in that symbol. We could probably go ahead and put in first. Here's the graph that's drawn in. Is the shading above it or below it? You should quickly be able to see it's below. So we're going to use this symbol in our inequality. Now I just got to fill in the rest of it. And the rest of it's going to be based off of the slope of the line and the vertex. Okay? So here's what you need to remember. Okay? You can do this one of two ways. You can either recognize that this line still has a slope of 1. Okay, they're all in the corners. Okay, and it's in both directions. So that's automatically going to tell you that there's just going to be an x inside. Okay, there is not going to be any slope in front of it. Okay, now the rest of it, remember, there's two different forms of a linear or of an absolute value inequality. Okay. One is the mx plus b inside the absolute value and then plus c. And the other one is this. And we learned today what all of these values mean. And one of the things that we learned is that the h and the k represent how this graph shifted from the parent function. The parent function began here in the center, like this, right? So let's look to see what the parent function did. The vertex of the parent function is 0, 0, right in the middle. Well, which way did it move, left or right? we should be able to tell that it moved to the left. How far left? Let's count. 1, 2. It moved 2 to the left. If the left movement moved 2 to the left, that would be a positive H. So positive H moves to the left, and that's what it did. It moved to the left 2 units. So that means that if the H was a positive H, I'm going to put in a plus 2 here. And then the other thing I'm going to look at is I went to the left, but then did I go up or down? Well, you should see that you went down. You went down 1, 2, 3. So the K value is going to be a negative K because I went down 3 units. So if I went down 3 units, then I have to attach out here a minus 3. And there is my inequality, my absolute value inequality that is shown by this graph, okay? Again, I have to look at the translation. Did it move left or right? And then I'm going to look at where the graph is shaded and what kind of line is drawn in because I have to know if it's dotted or solid. So hopefully that'll get you started on some of your homework problems. So one part of your homework problem is going to ask you to graph the linear inequalities and the absolute value inequalities and shade in the correct region. So you got to first graph it correctly. Then you got to make sure you got the right type of line, solid or dotted. And then you got to make sure that it's properly shaded. The other type of problem you're going to do on homework 2.7 is you're going to be given the inequality, kind of like we did here where I told you to shade it in ahead of time, and you got to write the equation that matches it. So hopefully that'll get you started and that'll help you with homework 2.